right. Welcome to a brand new video of the Targeted Individual Program, Targeted Individual Experience. You guys will not be hearing the same effects tonight. I am currently not home. I'm still currently over by my two youngest children, their mother's apartment. Was gonna go home tonight, but I was so tired. Um, and then all day, the targeting, the remote no monitoring, the constant in-home surveillance, along with the remote no monitoring and the constant police sirens. It's kind of, it wears down on you from time to time, right? So as much as I may, um, record my videos showing you guys what it is that they're doing, it does take an effect on you. And so today I had to again take my Sulotriptan because I knew whenever they start targeting me this heavy, particularly in the manner that they did today, which was constant, repeatedly, very frequent, right? So they go from the, what I call the hit and run tactics, or the hit and run method, to particularly with the police sirens and the ambulance and the car honking, and then they will move to manipulating and hijacking the consciousness of my kids, their mother, to target me. And then they will use the police siren as an intimidation tactic so that I won't leave, right? So to try to nullify the fight or flaunt the fight off flight phenomenon, right? Flight off fight phenomenon. Let me see, make sure I'm saying that right. And so, it affects you to the point where you become lethargic in a sense. You become, complacent, right? So today, many times I'm saying, I should leave, or maybe I'll stay, just because when I say I leave, they'll use the police sirens, and I'll say, well, I'm going to leave anyway. And then what they'll do, they'll ease off on the noise campaign with the police sirens. They do what is called reverse psychology, right? And they do it in a very damaging way. Okay. And so, even this morning, I barely got any sleep. I think I got probably about 3 or 4 hours sleep because I went to bed pretty late Sunday night. I don't know why. For years I've been telling her she needs to stop doing our daughter's hair on a Sunday, because the kids were up until 1 o'clock. She did my daughter's hair, and then my son, she twisted his hair. So they didn't go to bed till after 1, and I didn't go to bed till probably minutes to 2. After 2, I didn't even look at the time. But I had to get up at 6, about 6:30. So I barely got any sleep. So again, and they know this. This is why they were attacking me so heavily, because you're under surveillance if you're a TI, and so they know that when you are tired, you barely got any sleep, is when they will not only remote they'll monitor you, but hit you with microwave radio wave frequency in order to affect your nervous system. So today I didn't do any housework or anything like that, because I was like, I'm too tired. And again, with the target, and you guys see in the videos that I upload, I still have another video that I'm not sure if I uploaded or not, but you'll see I will upload it before this one. And as I'm walking back with my daughter, picking her up from school, you see another police vehicle, with the synchronization, right? And so because I had, a bag in my hand and holding my cane, they'll, like I said, they figure when they know when you have, particularly with me, because I'm always recording. So when I have things in my hands, then they will use the police again to do the intimidation tactic. But I literally were at the crosswalk, and I literally, when the light changed, I literally stayed. I didn't walk across. I waited for the other light to change so the police vehicle can drive towards my direction, and I was recording because I wanted people to see and understand this. So, I've shown this many times where they will target me heavily. But during the day, every time I go outside, there will always be a heavy police presence, and in a way, it's in a synchronized way. So, whether I'm walking to the corner of a block, they will be turning. If I'm, at a walking towards the crosswalk, they'll be coming down and intersecting at the same time. It's called synchronization. All right. So at that point, I know not only am I being tracked, but I'm also being my conscious mind is being hijacked. All right. And so when I came in, that sense of nervousness, right? It's not based on suspicion. Okay. Like that's what they, try to do in terms of creating a criminalized mindset. But it's in terms of being hit with the noise campaign, the effect that it has on my nervous system. So, for example, I find myself like knocking things over. Like if I go to grab something, you kind of lose control of your motor system somewhat. So you're kind of knocking stuff over, you're dropping stuff because your nervous system has been affected to where you're like things fall out of your hands, right? Because you no longer have that that combination of cognitive thinking or cognitive ability with your movement, your how you grab things, how things will feel to you. So things that are light will all of a sudden start to feel heavy in your hand. And so this is why you kind of drop stuff, because again, it affects your nervous system. And particularly today, the word drop, as I said, the word drop, you'll drop something, you hear the car honking. Particularly today, there's been a lot of that. Every time the word drop is said, the word cut, right? In terms of, either cutting you out of the program, which I really would wish they would, because I didn't sign up for this. And this is non-consensual. This is torture. This is crimes against humanity. This is conspiracy against my rights, as well as the rights of TIs and other people. And they understand and they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing is is criminalistic in nature. This is why when I expose them, they will fall back, right? But then they will put you in situations in which, like today, as I was going to get the cupcakes and juices for my daughter so I can take to her school, because yesterday was her birthday. This is where they'll have, if they know you're going to that particular grocery, particular store, whatever it is, they will have people there waiting. They will have the employees targeting you. They will have, the shoppers, patrons targeting you also. And so they'll do kind of things like even today when I was there, they were trying to use a honey trap, right? So there was this very tall black woman, probably about in her 30s, maybe close to 40, what have you. And they all kept looking at her, right? So she was, tall. She had her hair natural. It was kind of like, she had like it in a big fro. Beautiful hair. And they know I love women with natural hair, particularly black women with natural hair, natural afro. And so they will try to use like as a bargaining. Oh, well, we can, manipulate her to be with you or have you. I'm not interested in that. Like I said, I understand. I can see the honey traps and the manipulation. I couldn't see before, but I can see it, right? For the past couple of years, I've been, due to me studying what it is that they were doing, recognizing the honey traps, how they were doing these things to me subconsciously, okay? Didn't even know it at the time, but now I know. So now I kind of avoid that because, again, I know it's kind of like forced and it's not a natural thing that's occurring. Excuse me. It's not a natural thing that's occurring. It's a manipulative things that's occurring. And so I just don't engage in it. I don't play that game with them. When you're a TI, particularly in the early stage, because you don't know what's going on, and particularly when they're using silent sound on you, you cannot differentiate between your own thoughts and what it is that they're putting into your head. Okay, because again, silent sound is they're giving you commands, ideas, what have you. A lot of it is negative, but you cannot differentiate it because you're not hearing somebody else's voice. So it's not like voice to skull. where you can differentiate between voices. No, this is your own inner voice or your inner own thought pattern in which they are manipulated. Okay, and this is how they've been able to get away with what they've been doing, criminalizing particularly black men in general, criminalizing black boys and black men with this technology, right? And they think and believe that no one's going to believe us, right? Not just as black men, but as TIs also, right? That no one's going to believe us at all in what we're saying. And so I had talked about doing a video in which showing you cases in which court cases in which coercive persuasion has been brought to the attention of the courts, and and how it's been proven, right, that coercive persuasion do work. Not only do they work, but people can be manipulated, intimidated, threatened to exhibit a heightened fight or flight phenomenon, as well as with the coercive nature of those of the threat, and how it affects your ability, how it negatively impacts you, not only your mindset, your psychological state, but also your nervous system, your behavior, right? And so I always talk about during the 1980s, you had Margaret Singer, not Margaret Sanger from Planned Parenthood. This was Margaret Singer. She was the world foremost expert on cults and coercive. I talk about experts on cults. Hear the police sirens in the background. And I don't have the sound effect with me, so I can't really do it, but I'm just going to mention it as it happens, right? So what did the U.S. government do, right? So they brought her in front of Congress. She was with another expert. This was a male psychiatrist. And during their testimony, at least halfway through their testimony, they ended the questioning, right? They ended the hearing. Why? Because they brought in two new psychiatrists, again, paid CIA doctors, to dispute what Dr. Margaret Singer was saying and what she was talking about. And she's the one that created the definition, right, the terminology for coercive persuasion programming as we define it and as we know it today. All right. And you see this background image here. It's called brain-to-brain telepathy, because I want you to understand that as TIs, because we're microchip, and with using us as non-consensual human experimentation subjects, they are able to develop artificial intelligence. So when we think things, we're given, and particularly in my situation, where you're constantly hearing the car honking, police sirens, ambulance sirens, fire truck sirens, such and such, even projection of sound, like coughing sounds, spitting sound, sniffling sound, stuff like that, that's projected. It is projected externally, right? And how I know, because again, is the directionality, right, of what I notice and what I hear. And so that's how I'm able to differentiate it. Whereas when it happens internally, intracranially, with what the police would do sometimes, when I will wake up out of my sleep and start hearing sirens, I hear it intracranially, meaning that in between my audio receptors, right? So you hear it within your skull, and it's a very it's kind of like it sound, like when you're underwater, right? But it's not muffled. It is like that's the word I'm looking for. It's kind of like if you're in a big open space, right? Or not say big, but a big open enclosure, right? But like this, where you have an enclosure with a big space. So it's kind of somewhat hollow, and it happens so quick, but it's loud, right? So you hear it loud in your, you know, in your mind. So as I was saying, so the CIA, right, brought in their own psychiatrists because you know why they did that, to discredit Dr. Margaret Singer and the other psychiatrists that was there, and so that because again, if you go back and do the research, you start to see a lot of these cults, particularly the cult leaders, came out of the CIA. They came out of the military. They came out of the CIA. For example, Charles Manson has ties to the CIA. All right. Again, that's well known. Okay. And other cults. So when you start to see also these mentalists, right, these individuals, they all came out of the CIA. And they've been trained in the art of psychological manipulation and coercive persuasion tactics, all these different things, NLP, dark NLP in particular, all these psychological tactics and methods. So they are expert in manipulating the human mind, right? So I wanted to talk about coercive persuasion programming because again, I like to reintroduce it from time to time because we have been conditioned with a forgetful mind, right? And particularly as a black person, I know we as black people are forgetting with a condition, a program with a forgetful mind. And this is done in order to neutralize the anger and the frustration of what we go through as a people living under a system of white racism, with a majority of those within the society who are non-black racist towards black people or have a high level of bigotry. Okay, again, I'm not saying this as my opinion. Again, I like to back it up with facts, and which I will, and you guys are gonna see that. Okay, so let's see here. All right, so this is from the website psychologicalharassment.com. All right, and this section is called coercive mind control tactics. Today, mind control or brainwashing in academia is commonly referred to as coercive persuasion. Coercive psychological systems are coercive influence. The short definition below comes from Dr. Margaret Singer, Professor Emeritus at the University of California at Berkeley, the acknowledged leading authority in the world on mind control and cults. A short review. Coercion is defined by the American Heritage Dictionary as 1. To force to act or think in a certain manner. 2. To dominate, restrain, or control by force. 3. To bring about by force. Coercive psychological systems are behavioral change program which use psychological force in a coercive way to cause the learning and adaptation of an ideology to designate set of beliefs, idea, attitudes, or behavior. The essential strategy used by the operators of these programs is to systematically select, sequence, and coordinate many different types of coercive influence, anxiety, and stress-producing tactics over continuous periods of time. In such a program, the subject is forced to adapt in a series of tiny invisible steps. Each tiny step is designed to be significantly small so that the subject will not notice the change in themselves or identify the coercive nature of the processes being used. The subject of these tactics do not become aware of the hidden organizational purpose of the coercive psychological program until much later, if ever. These tactics are usually applied in a group setting by, and I wouldn't even say by well-intended, I'm going to just say by deceived friends and allies of the victim. So why I'm not going to no longer, whenever I read this, read the well-intended. Because if it's well intended, you would question any authoritative figure who come to you and ask you to engage in such a program, because you should have the understanding of the danger. Not only do these types of psychological program do to the individual, but to the people around them. Okay. And so, we're living in the age of information, but the majority of people, particularly in this society, are ignorant to this fact. Okay. And though they see the detrimental effect of it, they either ignore it because they themselves have been conditioned also, but in a different way, in a different manner, in terms of how they interact with us as target individuals, as victims of non-consensual human experimentation and illegal microchipping, and victims of covert warfare and psychological warfare. Okay? So the coercive, where am I here? So the subject, okay, read that. This keeps the victim from putting up the ego defense we normally maintain in known adversarial situations. Now, this itself is not true from my experience, because the one thing that we as human beings, our natural inclination, our natural instinct is that when we feel that we are being attacked, and particularly when they are using technology, right, to create a double personality within you, or trying to change your personality by transmitting, okay, other thoughts to your mind, but you are hearing your own inner thought, which is contrary to what thoughts you would previously have or even think about, right? And so what that does is that it causes confusion. And there's a article called "Did My Brain Chip Made Me Do It?" Okay, and that's one of the danger, one of the highly unethical use of these technology, what it does to an individual. And because, again, these are highly classified technology, those within the government agency, the security agencies, can hide behind the veil of secrecy in terms of claiming national security or public safety. Okay? And they have always used that as a way of hiding the crimes that they have engaged in. And so whenever I read about certain individuals committing an act of violence to not only to themselves but to the people around them, and particularly when I hear about these religious believers who are doing things to the people around them and claiming that these people have demons in them and all this other thing, I know that these technologies being used on them. Okay? And I always remember, that these individuals who have the dark triad personality traits, they will. There's nothing that they would not do, okay, in order to advance the technology for control of humanity in terms of human beings in our minds and our psychology, our cognitive abilities, and they have used these technologies to steal from other people. Okay. And so again, I just like to bring that up, right? To imagine stealing your intellectual property, which is your mind and what's in your mind. Let's see if you are a brilliant scientist, right? And the government wants to steal your ideas, right? Your formulas, right? They can do that, and you wouldn't even know about it. All right. So it isn't like you file a trade patent or what have you. They don't have to do that. They can steal it from you, and they can file the patent before you even do. Right? And how are you going to prove that it's yours and not theirs? So the implications are, uh, overwhelming of what they can do. Okay, so um, apart from any, right, the coercive psychological influence of these programs aim to overcome the victim's critical thinking abilities and free will. Apart from any appeal to informed judgment, victims gradually lose their ability to make independent decisions and exercise informed consent. So, like what I do sometimes when I'm being attacked so much, and I may say something or I may do something, then I just have to stop and say, you know what? Let me not fall into this game that they want to play. Okay? Because the narrative is that they've already created a narrative about your personality, which is not true. And so now they have to make you into the narrative that they invented about you, right? And as black people, we know this all too well, right? We see how we, in terms of stereotypes against black people, but now you see black people, particularly women, engaging and becoming those stereotypes. And there's a reason why. Okay, this, I mean, this is why it's important that we understand history, that we learn from history, that we study history. Okay? So, their critical thinking, defensive, cognitive processes, value attitudes, value ideas, attitudes, conduct, and ability to reason are undermined by a technological process rather than by meaningful free choice, rationality, or the inherent merit or value of the ideas or proposition being presented. How do they work? The tactics used to create undue psychological and social influence, often by means involving anxiety and stress, fall into 7 main categories. And so now, why is anxiety and stress used the most? Because anxiety and stress also not only cause psychological damage, but neurological damage, physical damage, your health. From stress, you can have strokes. You can develop? You can have a heart attack, right? With the psychological, you can have a psychotic break. You can go through psychosis because of the isolation, the coercive threat using the police. So you don't want to go outside. You don't want to eat. The use of shame, guilt, and other shame-based tactics, right, is what they use. And again, it's done in a psychological way, and it's done in a technological way that it's very hard for victims to prove it, but you can. And this is why I continue to document, regardless of the threat, the threat to assassinate me, the threat to take away my disability, the constant threat of, every time my back hurts, that if I moan or yell in pain, there's always police sirens following up immediately, right? And this is instantly. Even sometimes before, like recently, when I was getting the ice pick headaches, about a second or two before that happened, the police sirens, okay, in order to try to intimidate me into not yelling. Because you know why? They're listening, I'm under surveillance, and so they know that they're causing me pain, distress, and other injury, right? And so in order to alleviate themselves of any guilt, right, or any feeling of sorrow or sadness because of what they're doing, they will use the police in order to try to do that. But you got to understand their psychology, right? Just go research the dog triad personality types, and some of them don't even care. But I think because they got so many people involved targeting you, that not everybody is conditioned to hate you, right? See, because when they hate you, they take what it is that if they can get people to hate you, that means that they can take away your humanity. That means that they can take away your support system. No one will help you. Okay. So, Anyhow, let's go through the tactics, right? So, tactic one: increase suggestibility and soften up the individual through specific hypnotic or other suggestibility increasing techniques such as extended audio, which you guys see in my video. Sometimes when I go to do a video, immediately they will start playing music. Okay, you know what I'm saying? In order to try to get my video to get a copyright strike off of YouTube, or to try and affect me emotionally, right? So that they'll play songs like, particularly when they break up your relationship, they will start to play these sad love songs or song about you know breakups and stuff like that, heartache, heartbreak, stuff like that. And it's done extensively. Okay, why? Because they want to have emotional control over you, whether it be, and it's all negatively, to get you to react in a negative way. Okay. So let's see: extended audio, visual, verbal, or tactile fixation drill, which I talk about a lot. Excessive exact repetition of routine activities, sleep restriction, and nutritional restriction. Tactics 2: establish control over the person's social environment, time, and sources of social support by a system of often excessive reward and punishment. Social isolation is promoted. This is what happened, like I talk about sometimes, when they target me so heavily, and I'll exhibit the fight or flight. And what they've been doing recently, since I've been here, is to again do the hit and run type of thing, except for today, where it was very frequent. And because I was so tired, didn't really want to go home because, again, I'm so tired. I take a muscle relaxer. So after a few days of being hit heavily with this stuff, it affects you. Okay, it weighs you down. You become kind of like, lethargic, like I said, kind of depressed. And so I said to myself, you know what, I need to, then you start to get that, when I start to like lose control over my motor function, and I go to reach for something, I'll just knock it over. Then I said, you know what, I need to do something to where I can calm down my fight or flight response, so that way my nervous system isn't greatly affected, right? And so this is why I'm doing this video. All right. And the funny thing about it too is that I was saying to myself, the video that I wanted to do, but as I was doing some research, I found 2 articles, right? One from the U.S. government and one from the website is here. I'll show you guys when I'm finished with this, that talks about these things, right? And I was like, man, this is perfect. Though I didn't read all of it, and again, you guys are gonna be reading with me, because again, I didn't have time, and I needed to do this just to calm myself and to, get back into doing the video, because I felt like, with the attacks that's been happening, unconsciously, I've been, subdued, in a sense of, I'm usually feeling inspired to go and do a video. Okay. So, yes. Anyhow, let's go to tactics 2: establish control over the person's environment, social environment, time, and source of social support by a system of often excessive reward and punishment. Social isolation is promoted. Contact with family and friends is abridged, as is contact with persons who do not share group-approved attitudes. And you just hear the police sirens. And what I'm doing right now, because I have my hands on the chair, my son gaming chair, and I'm using my left hand to scratch my right hand. And so they usually do this to me, where they'll take one of their hands and just put it across their stomach, right? So it's like, just if you stand up and you take one of your hands and just put it across your stomach, So that's supposed to, you know, have a negative association, whatever it is that they put into my subconscious. Though it doesn't, at times when it was being done regularly, you know, you start to feel negatively, right? And so once I started to recognize that, I started to, whatever it is that was coming into my mind that I think was going to be negative, I change it, right? Into something positive, or create a positive word to combat, what they've put into my subconscious mind. Okay, so yeah, economic and other dependence on the group is fostered. So this is what the government does when they do these types of non-consensual experimentation. What they've done is, again, because they know that they've injured you with these weapons, and the fact that they disable you, is to now use the fact that you're getting disability as a method to control you, to silence you, to the constant threat of having your disability taken away. All right, and this is what they've been doing. Okay. Tactics 3. Prohibit disconfirming information and non-supporting opinion in group communication. Rules exist about permissible topics to discuss with outsiders. Communication is highly controlled, and in-group language is usually constructed. So this they do a lot. And what they'll do is that, let's say if I'm talking to someone, and let's say talking to someone, but let's say I'm having a conversation with someone. Okay, and I'm talking about this program, the weapons that they've created. Particularly, I'm also talking about the truth about religion. And so from time to time, that person that I was talking to, they will put them in my path, right, to have a conversation. And then if I talk about, like there's some people I talk about, the truth about religion with, and so they'll use that person. And when I begin talking about that, they will do these type of hand signals, sticking their fingers in their ears, looking up at the sky, that sort of thing, right? And again, because I know what's going on, I continue to speak, what it is that was speaking on. And like I said, you can go look it up yourself. I'll give you guys an example. So, was it yesterday or the day before? I was outside, I think, where did I go? I came off, maybe from the store, what have you. So they have this young guy that live in Pam's building. Now, I've been talking about religion. I know that he's religious. He's the same dude that they would send to count money in front of me. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to give him some education, right? And so whenever I talk about these things, like I was talking about Dr. Martin Luther King, and how Dr. Martin Luther King really didn't take Christianity literally. Like he didn't believe that Jesus Christ was real and the apostles were real, but he was using Christianity as how it should be used, right? To teach valuable life lessons, right? Because he knew these things were allegories. So if you go on to the Stanford King's Institute, right, you can read some of his writings, right? And he's particularly when he's drawing comparisons with other previous religious belief system with Christianity, and he talks about these things, even things that I didn't know, that I just recently found out. And I'm like, man, Dr. King was woke. I mean, woke in the true sense of the word woke, right? Not how the liberals have co-opted the word that black people use and give it a somewhat different definition in the 90s when we were coming into some form of consciousness, understanding white racism, or what they call white supremacy, and the system. Because again, we had professors in colleges, black professors, who were attacked by white professors because they were teaching the truth about black history, African history. And again, in order to protect the lies that they've been teaching within these universities, they attack these black professors, they villainized them, they blacklisted them, they fired them, And so it was very hard for black elders who were brilliant in their scholarship. They were brilliant thinkers. They were brilliant psychiatrists, psychologists, but they were ultimately attacked. They were attacked economically. They were attacked psychologically. They were attacked sexually. They were attacked neurologically. They were drug given cancer. Okay, in order to silence them once and for all and have these racists get away with it. Okay? So, let's go. Tactics 3, prohibit disconfirming information. A non-supporting opinion in group communication. Rules exist about permissible topic to discuss with outsiders. Communication is highly controlled, and in-group language is usually constructed. Tactics 4, make the person reevaluate the most central aspect of his or her experience of self and prior conduct in negative ways. Again, this is what they'll say to these perps, but these perps don't really understand that they're the ones that have been manipulating you to engage in a negative way, right? And so we don't even. I'll give you an example. You look at hip hop culture today. The lyrics are more so negative. The behavior from these artists are more negative, but yet they are rewarded. And I talked about this earlier in my targeting, where whenever I had a feeling of anger, particularly when they were engaging in the psyops, and I become angry and literally like cursing people out, right? They would send somebody to come and count money in front of me. And I started to understand what they were doing. So they would punish you for engaging in positive behavior and give you this false sense of reward for what will be rewards for engaging in negative behavior. But the reality is that they're creating a backwards way of thinking within your mind. See, they, and particularly with a large portion of particularly young black people today, their negative behavior is being rewarded, and what that is called operant conditioning. I'll talk about this. This is James Watson. I usually get confused between him and B.F. Skinner, but I think it's James Watson that came up with the term operant conditioning in psychology. And again, this is a punishment and reward psychological tactics and a method. All right, our programming. So. All right. Efforts are designed to destabilize and listen to this. Efforts are designed to destabilize and undermines the subject basic consciousness, reality awareness, worldviews, emotional control, and defense mechanism. The subject is guided to reinterpret his or her life history and adopt a new version of causality, right? Tactic 5, create a sense of powerlessness, what is learned helplessness, by subjecting the person to intense and frequent actions and situations which undermines the person's confidence in himself and his judgment or her judgment, right? Tactic 6, create strong aversive emotional arousal in the subject by use of non-physical punishments such as intense humiliation, loss of privilege, social isolation, social status change, intense guilt, anxiety, manipulation, and other techniques. Tactics 7, intimidate the person with the use of group sanctioned secular psychological threats. For example, it may be suggested or implied that failure to adopt the approved attitudes, belief, or consequent behavior will lead to severe punishment or dire consequences such as physical or mental illness. Again, I talked about this all the time. They will use the mental illness labeling to their advantage. They'll take it away in terms of how they'll say, okay, now he or she's not crazy. Again, to their advantage, and it's constantly repeated over and over, right? The reappearance of a prior physical illness, drug dependence, economic collapse, social failure, divorce, disintegration, failure to find a mate. Also, one of the things that they'll do is because, again, um, they will, because especially if you're TIU on disability and you're exposing them, they will also, because of their psychology, their dark personality and their psychotic nature, will tell you what's going to happen, like what it is that they're planning, their agenda. And the reason why, as any psychopath or sociopath, when they have their victims, is to torture the victims by revealing what's going to happen to terrorize the victims, right? So, for example, they will send people in wheelchairs. They'll send people, like today, when I went to the groceries, there was a guy come out of the grocery store. Now, he was kind of like limping somewhat, but I think but like this, he was an agent, he was an actor, right? Then I got to pick up my daughter from school, and there was a woman, there, a black woman there, and she was limping, but obviously she had a physical illness, right? You can see. So, and again, then they do these things to send this subliminal message that, oh, we have not damaged you, so you shouldn't be on disability. Well, I have my X-ray. See, one thing they try to do is to make your mind believe things, but if you try to think in a logical or realistic sense. For example, go and get your medical records. Go and get examinations. Go and get X-rays, MRIs. My next MRI, which I need to do, an X-ray, because again my condition has gotten worse, particularly with my neck, particularly my back cracking every time I get up or twist or turn. Sometimes it's so loud I'm around my kids, and my daughter's like, "Oh, Dad, I just heard your back crack," and I was like, "Yeah, But again, being hit with these technology, microwave, radio wave, what it does, particularly to your nervous system, to your bones, the moisture, it evaporates the moisture within your bones. My knee recently has started to really bother me, and again, this is the hardening of the cartilage in between your joints, but because these microwave radio frequency weapons are being used on this, it basically raises your body temperature, right? So therefore, things like your cartilage will start to harden sooner than later on in life. This is why targets in their 40s and 50s, we exhibit symptoms of illnesses that you would normally develop for people well into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Okay, so you age prematurely when you're being hit with these weapons. Okay, and that's one of the effects and symptoms of these weapons being used on you as a human being. All right. Okay. So the reappearance of a prior physical illness, drug dependence, economic collapse, social failure, divorce, disintegration, failure to find a mate, etc. So for me, like since I've said, listen, I'm not in the dating market anymore. I'm very aware of what's going on and how they manipulated me in the past, and they're trying to do it again. But no, I can see the manipulation, so it's very hard for them to even achieve that. So what they'll do, like I said, they'll send honey traps, and if I don't engage in speaking to the honey traps, they will get angry, and they'll show their anger again by more psychological attacks, all right, and by threatening to take away my disability. Okay, so yeah. Anyhow, what else? These tactics of psychological force are applied to such a severe degree that the individual's capacity to make informed or free choices becomes inhibited. The victims become unable to make the normal, wise, or balanced decision which they most likely or normally would have made had they not been unknowingly manipulated by these unknowingly manipulated by these coordinated technical processes. The cumulative effect of these processes can be an even more effective form of undue influence than pain, torture, drugs, or the use of physical force and physical and legal threats, which again, all of these things they do. Okay. Um, so, how does coercive psychological persuasion differ from other kinds of influence? Coercive psychological systems are distinguished from benign social learning or peaceful persuasion by the specific condition under which they are conducted. These conditions include the type and number of coercive psychological threats used. Coercive psychological tactics used, the severity of environmental and interpersonal manipulation, and the amount of psychological force employed to suppress particular unwanted behavior or to train desired behavior. Okay. Coercive force is traditionally visualized in physical terms. In this form, it is easily definable, clear cut, and ambiguous. Coercive psychological force, unfortunately, has not been so easy to see and define, and this is why I do what I do. Okay, because I want it to be easily seen and defined so that people who understand what's going on, are trying to understand what's going on, can understand what's going on and could take the appropriate measures, develop the appropriate counter methods to combat what it is that's being done. Because what they are doing, every time I see some mass shooting, I know that that individual have been brainwashed. I know that that individual have been put through a coercive persuasion program. Okay, and they use trauma also, either through the creation of trauma from others to directly affect you, or to create trauma within your life so that they can use you in the future. Okay, and I always talk about this. My brother and I, all right, we're twins. We've been put into this program early on in my targeting. I used to be very angry about how they would target me at work. Right, they would mess with my files and stuff like that. And then I started recording because my manager used to always chew my head off, and they were trying to make me look incompetent until I started recording exactly where I put my files, and I sent my files there, and they would lie. They would say, no, we didn't get it. And I would say, okay, well, look, I took a picture. Here it is. Right? Until it got to the point where, they were still doing it, but he didn't believe them. Why? Because I kept showing them, this is where I placed the file. It was there. Okay, so when they couldn't do that, they started posting these little things like when I go to punch out, they posted a newspaper, like the comic strip that says "Loose lips sink ships." And when the time when I think Obama in 2008, when Obama was elected president, they were on the floor that I worked on. They put up a sign as I was going into the office space where I worked at. Yes, we can. There was no other sign like that in the entire building, right? And they had about 3 or 4 floors of that building. There was no other sign there. So again, hey, all right. So these things were all happening at once. Leaving my job and seeing white skinheads, I should say, at the corner. All right, I was going, and so it was a heavily fear-based tactics and the use of these white racist police officers to try and intimidate me. And every time they see me, they will grab their gun, and the holster, like put their hands on their gun on the holster. I'm like, okay, yeah, it affected you so bad that I did have a psychological break. But that's with anybody, and particularly when you were drugged. Right, so them drugging you is to make it easier for you to have a psychological break because of the coercive psychological threat and undue influence. All right, so so as I was saying, so I used to get very angry, and then all of a sudden I'm walking on my block coming from work at night, and I get call. I see a person that I knew went to in the neighborhood calls me over and open up the trunk of his car and take out a box and say, "Hey, you want to see something?" And you know, it was a gun. And believe me, I've my first thing was that I asked him how much, but I said, no, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't sound right. So I just said, that's nice, and I just walked off. Right? My brother had an incident where he went into the hospital. He went to the hospital. He was like, well, again, using silent sound, they can command you and direct you to go where they want you to go. So he went to the hospital. He walks into the hospital. He goes to the bathroom. And what did he find in the bathroom? On the sink was two clips, 9mm clips, fully full with bullets, right? And I'm sure they probably was going to place the gun somewhere, but it might have been a test too. I'm not sure for him. It might have been a test, and so he didn't touch it. I said that was good, and he went to the security guard, and they retrieved the those two clips. So they conditioning. Like I said, when I hear about these lone shooters, stuff like that, I know that these individuals are being brainwashed, right? And again, when these dark tribes want to create a certain agenda, this is what they'll do. And trust me, the racist left and the racist right do it. Those within the government, because they have their agenda. Remember, they're two sides of the same coin. Two sides of the very same coin. Okay? And when it comes to this white racism thing, they are united in their war against, particularly me as a black person, us as black people, right? And so as TIs, like I said, we're whether you're if you're non-black, again, what I'm saying, it doesn't take away from what's being done to you. All right, so I never want you to feel like as if I'm trying to diminish what it is that you're going through. I'm not. I always acknowledge that. Okay, and I have to keep saying that because I know how we think as TIs, right? And so, and again, just want you guys to understand that. But I'm speaking not only as a TI, but as a black person. And the reality is, in America, we as black people, right? You look at the negative conditioning and programming that has been done to us as a people, as a group, is detrimental to us. Okay? So, all right? Okay. So, I'm not going to finish read the rest of this, but I want to talk about those. This is Robert J. Lipton, again, who created this a criteria to explain thought reform or mind control again, right? And particularly when it comes to within cults, right? The use of covert manipulation to make things look as if it's so-called naturally and mystical and spiritual, and bringing you closer to God, which is bringing you closer into indoctrination, to seeing the cult leader as a prophet of God. See, this is what the Catholic Church have done. This is what these prosperities pastors have done. Even the pastors within your own churches, just not the large churches, but the smaller churches, because there's so many of these smaller religious churches, right? Particularly Christian churches, right? They may go by different denomination, but they're all reading from, the same literature, right? There may be some differences depending on the denomination that they belong to, but make no mistake about it, the King James Bible is the foundation of their altered religious book, right? So, yeah, they may interpret certain things a certain way, but it still comes from the Catholic Church, right? And as I said, still comes from the Catholic Church here. Whoop. Yes. Because they have constructed a well-placed lie, and they need to keep up the act, because when they understand that when people find out the truth, right, that they would no longer have to control all the wealth that they continue to, you know, get from the ignorance and from the ignorant, right? So, Robert J. Lifton, right? Uh, 8 criteria of thought reform must apply to the executive success programs, right? Again, that's their terminology in terms of how it's applied to the executive success program, right? Um, One, milieu control of communications within the group environment, resulting in a significant degree of isolation from the surrounding society. Now, this is more for group conditioning, right? Whereas the coercive persuasion programming is for more of an individual type. But if you do this to enough individual, then they become a group. Now, they may not come together as in the sense of what a group will come together as a cult, but they will come together to, in terms of the coercive persuasion programming, to try to expose what's going on, to bring awareness, to meet each other, to just to have a fellowship with other TIs, to let them know that they're not alone in this, and this is also being done to other people, right? But with group, we're talking about cults now. We're talking about, like, the Branch Davidian, Jim Jones, the Charles Manson, in terms of, though he didn't have a large group, but the people that were around him were part of his group, and others, right? So he's talking about, like, the military. The military is an indoctrination system. The police, the mob, the accused, all these criminal entities, as well as government entities, sports also, right? So this has a broader implication, right? So it's a control of communication within the group environment, resulting in a significant degree of isolation from the surrounding society. It includes other techniques to restrict members' contact from outside world, and to be able to make critical, rational judgment about information, overwork, busyness, multiple lengthy meetings, etc. Lipton, the most basic feature of the thought reform environment, the psychological current upon which all else depend, is the control of human communication. This includes not only the individual communication with the outside world, but also his communication with himself. Thought reform participants may be in doubt as to who is telling what to whom, but the fact that the extensive information about everyone is being conveyed to the authorities is always known. Having experienced the impact of what they consider to be an ultimate truth, they consider it their duty to create an environment containing no more or no less than this truth, right? And again, that what kind of truth? Is it the absolute truth, or is it their truth, right? The group member is deprived of the combination of external information and inner reflecting, which anyone requires to test the realities of his or her environment, and to maintain a measure of identity separate from it. Phone tree. Each new student will assign a coach, a person of rank yellow or higher. The coach must not be the person who introduced the student to ESP. Each student will call the coach without fail on a schedule that is to be mutual benefit to the students and the coach. So again, this is just showing you how they use these in this executive success program, right? But I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to go into the definition of the 7 criteria, right? As here. So, mystical manipulation. The claim of divine authority or spiritual advancement that allows the leader to reinterpret events as he or she wishes, or make prophecies or a pronouncement at will, all of the purpose of controlling group members. Lipton, the inevitable next step after Milieu control is extensive personal manipulation. Initiated from above, it seeks to provoke specific patterns of behavior and emotions in such a way that these will appear to have risen spontaneously from within the environment. Ideological totalists are impelled by a special kind of mystique which not only justifies such manipulation but makes them mandatory. They are agents chosen by history, by God, or by some other supernatural force to carry out the mystical imperative, the pursuit of which must supersede all consideration of decency or of immediate human welfare. Similarly, any thought or action which question the higher purpose is considered to be, as I said, higher purpose. You hear the police siren, whoop, because again, this is my purpose, one of my purpose, and they hate it when I say that because that is to expose them, and they don't want to be exposed. So because they think that they're doing their so-called God's work, which they're not, they're doing their own psychotic dark triad control, self, right? Their ego, and they feel that they are chosen for a higher power, which they're not, because again, they understand that what they believe in is a lie. Even if they'll tell you it's the truth, they know it's a lie. But it's the power that comes with it to control other people, and the money that they extort and make from, again, from the ignorance, from the naivety of religious believers. Again, it's, you try to mess that up, and they'll come after you. If they can't, like I said, if they can't recruit you to and use you for their purpose, they'll destroy you. Okay, but it is my purpose, and I'll say it over and over again. It is one of my purpose. Okay, the higher purpose cannot serve as adequate emotional. Okay, wait, where was I? Okay. Okay. Similarly, any thoughts or action to question higher purposes. Okay, I think I read that. The higher purpose is considered to be simulated by a lower purpose to be backward, selfish, and petty in the face of the great overriding mission. At the level of the individual person, the psychological response is this manipulative approach revolve about the basic polarity of trust and mistrust. One is asked to accept these manipulation on the basis of trust or faith. And again, this is what they will do, particularly with silent sound, is to make it, to send you a transmission that they are here to help you, they are your friend or what have you, and they're really not. What it is that they're there to give you a false sense of power, but because they're using technology, right? When you start to believe those things and you engage in negative behavior, the reality is you're going to have negative outcome. Now, they may give you a little positive outcome to get you to go darker, right? So they can use you and then, take the focus off of them, put it on you. It's distraction. Is ways in which they create distraction, okay? And this is something that we all have to understand. All right? They always got to keep you distracted, keep you from finding out the truth. All right? One is asked to accept these. Okay. When trust gives way to mistrust, the higher purpose cannot serve as adequate emotional substance. The individual then responds to the manipulation through developing the psychology of the pawn. Right? So I'll tell you how that works in my targeting. So the use of white women, white men, black men with dreads. And again, this is not just me. I'm just speaking from my personal experience, but I've heard other TIs say the same thing too, particularly those of us who are black, right? It's the same type of conditioning, the same type of programming, right? So, for example, I talk about how they'll try to have emotional control over me using Pam, send me subliminal messages about her being bisexual, or her dating white men, her dating black dudes with dreads, what have you, you know. And then there's like these factions that are fighting against each other, and you know, it's like, uh, and I give you an example today. So today I went to pick up my daughter, you know, and there was this guy in front of me. So, you know, there's two lines. We get close to the desk where you have the people who are working within in the school program, and he's asking me about kindergarten, what have you, and I'm just like, I don't know, man, you know. And so what he was doing is he was doing these hand signals, like, and then he points to one of the female behind the desk, right? A young woman. She could be either really light skinned black or Hispanic, what have you. And as he's pointing, he's using his middle finger, right? And so, you know, I started using my middle finger as I'm pointing, right? And then he makes the fist, you know, and then you know, he makes a fist, but it's not an upward fist, but it's a downward fist, right? Yeah, I could beat down. Yeah. Okay, motherfucker. Whenever you're ready. All right? Mother effers, whenever you're ready. Bad back and all, I'll still get a couple of hits in. And trust me, those hits, they're going to be in places where you may not wake up from. Um, so, anyhow, right? So then, you know, I'm like, whatever. So then now they start to use a lot of these females now, you know, walking in front of me, you know, crossing over in front of me. Now they can walk behind me, but again, it's what it is that they do is to kind of put you in a hypnotic trance, right? And I wasn't in a hypnotic trance because again, I recognize it, right? I recognize it, and I start to go on the psychological attack also, not just be defensive, but go on the attack. So that kind of breaks that whole, you know, transit state that they want to put you in. Okay. And so now, pick up my daughter. We were on our way back. Then my son was coming home from school, so we saw him and we got on the block. We got in the elevator, and he starts sticking out his middle finger, you know. And you know, I just ignore it because, like I said, I know it's not him. You know, it's how he's programmed, right? And the use of silent sound to co-opt his consciousness, right? So you know, got in the house, and then they start with the noise campaign, the remote no monitoring, heavy, frequently. And you know, like I said, this is why I have to do this video, because again, it kind of takes my focus away from what it is that they're doing, and me engaging them, and you know, saying I'm leaving, or I'm staying, based off of what it is that they're doing. So I was just like, you know what, let me try to do the rational thing, right? I'm tired, even though I can go to sleep, but I'm tired. My back starts hurting. So I just said, you know, let me. And again, like I said, I only got like about 3 or 4 hours sleep. So, and I took my sleeping pills, right? But I'm not taking more because, you know, they're making it very hard for me. Even though I take my sleeping pills to fall asleep now. Where in the beginning, before when I first got them, I would fall asleep fine, no problem. All right. Okay. So now, demand for purity. The world is viewed as black and white, and group members are constantly exhorted to strive for perfection. Consequently, guilt and shame are common and powerful control devices. Lipton. In the thought reform milieu, as in all situation of ideological totalitarianism, the experiential world is sharply divided into the pure and the impure, into the absolute good and the absolute evil. The good and the pure, of course, those ideas, feelings, and actions which are consistent with the totalist ideology and policy. Anything else is apt to be regulated to the bad and the impure. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing that right. The fit. Wow, can't I pronounce it? Anyway, let's try the philosophical, right? Assumption underlying this demand is the absolute purity is attainable by defining and manipulating the criteria of purity, and then by conducting an all-out war upon impurity. The ideological totalist creates a narrow world of guilt and shame. This is perpetuated by the ethos of continuous reform, a demand that one strive permanently, and I said the demand that one strive. Yeah, so if I guess once I develop my self confidence and not the false sense of confidence they try to instill within me, I guess then they'll again start using the police, right? Yeah, okay, we'll do whatever. You're gonna arrest me, gonna shoot me, whatever. Anyhow, again, I'm not scared. Okay, being hit with these weapons will affect your nervous system, and you will exhibit the fight or flight. But understand this, that once you get rid of that fear of dying, you'll see that all the threats, right? Again, you're going to be bothered by it because of the frequency and because of the weapons being used. But if they didn't use silent sound on you, didn't microwave you, they didn't use radio frequency on you to affect your nervous system, your emotions, you wouldn't have those feelings, okay? And they know this. All right. What was I here? So this is all right. The perpetuate by an ethos, the continuous reform, a demand that one strive permanently and painfully for something which not only does not exist, but is in fact alien to the human condition. Each person is made vulnerable through his or her profound inner sensitivities to his or her own limitations and to his or her unfulfilled potential. This existential guilt, the individual thus comes to apply the same totalist polarization of good and evil to his judgment of his own character, his or own character. He or she must also look upon his or her impurities as originating from outside influences. Once the individual person has experienced the totalist polarization of good and evil, he or she has created difficulty. He or she has great difficulty in regaining a more balanced inner sensitivity to the complexities of human morality. All right. Let's go to number 4. The cult of confession. Serious and often, I say cult of confession. I hear whoop in the background. Serious and often not so serious sin, as defined by the group, ought to be confessed either privately to a personal monitor or publicly to the group at large. So certain times during my targeting, right? Particularly if I'm on the bus, if I'm particularly even late, they will, like certain stops, there's like a church. And then as we get to that stop with the church right there, people on the bus start looking at the church. They're looking into the church and then looking at me. I'm like, listen, I already know about this shit. Okay. So, how about y'all confess? Okay. How about y'all confess to crimes against humanity, to poisoning of target individuals, to setting target individuals up, to lying and creating false negative about target individuals. How about you go and confess to that? Okay? So don't come to me with that shit. Don't come to me with this thing that you're more moral or you're highly moral or you're more spiritual, because you don't even know the first thing about spirituality. Most religious people, when they talk about spirituality, don't know what the hell they're talking about, because again, spirituality is a word that the Catholic Church and the Europeans have co-opted again. There's certain words that they've co-opted from cultures, and then they redefine it or put their own interpretation on it, which means nothing to what its original intent. Right? So I advise anybody when it comes to when they, as a TI, when they try to make you feel guilty or feel ashamed, understand they're the ones who should be feeling guilty and feel ashamed. Okay? So, either privately to a personal monitor or publicly to the group at large, Lipton, confession is carried beyond its ordinary religious, legal, and therapeutic expression to the point of becoming a cult in itself. There is the demand that one confess to crimes one has not committed, to sinfulness that is artificially induced in the name of a cure that is arbitrarily imposed. It's kind of like what the psychiatric industry, particularly pharmaceuticals. This is why the CIA, when you look, just go follow the money, right? Behind the pharmaceuticals, behind the transhumanist agendas, behind the private prisons, behind the technological development, particularly brain-computer interface, and it will come back. Even social media, it will come back to where you'll see the military and the CIA involvement. They're always involved. Okay, whether it be CIA agents who used to work for the agency are now positioning themselves in the technical aspect within social media, within television, within the movies. Okay, again, it is to keep up the well-placed lie or lies. Okay, there is the demand. Okay, so simple. All right, that artificially induced in the name of a cure that's artificial. Okay, such demand are made possible not only by the ambiguous human tendencies towards guilt and shame, but also by the need to give expression to these tendencies. In totalist hands, confession becomes a means of exploiting. And as TIs, this is how they can get these people to target you, because to get them involved in criminal activities, making them believe that they're doing something, they're doing God's work, or they're part of neighborhoods watch groups, what have you. But in reality, they are allowing, the government does, the CIA, particularly the FBI does this all the time, right? Is to get them involved in criminal activities, but define it to them as this is something that's legal, because these are the people who are in a position of authority, right? That's why I said these perps, they have a false sense of power, because again, they believe that they can get away with what they're doing because they're being controlled by those in authoritative position. Perfect example would be the Stanley Milgram experiment, right? So go and look at these social experimentation where you have people in position of authority, though they were really not in position of authority, but the idea that they can manipulate people into committing crimes or even killing people and not be held responsible. Example, the Nazi Germany, in terms of getting the German people to give up their sense of morality and what is right, by villainizing a group of people to where they create within the German society this this sense of self-deception, where they knew what was going on, but they act as if they didn't know and they didn't want to know, but deep down they knew. Okay, so again, you see how a whole country, whole societies of people, tens of millions of people can be indoctrinated into committing crimes against other groups of people. Okay, all right, so So in Toiler's hands, confession becomes a means of exploiting rather than offering solace for these vulnerabilities. The assumption underlying total exposure is the environment claim to total ownership of each individual self within it. The cult of confession makes it virtually impossible to attain a reasonable balance between worth and humility. Okay, uh, let's go number 5. The sacred science. Okay, the doctrine of the group is considered the ultimate truth, beyond all questioning or disputing. The leader of the group is likewise above criticism as the spokesperson for God on earth, Lipton. The total milieu contains an aura of sacredness around its basic dogma, holding it out as an ultimate moral vision of the ordering of human existence. The sacredness is evident in the prohibition, whether or not explicit, against the questioning of basic assumptions, and in the reverence which is demand for the originator of the word, the persist bearer of the word itself, while thus transcendent ordinary concern of logic. However, the milieu at the same time makes an exaggerated claim of airtight logic and absolute scientific precision. Thus, the ultimate moral vision becomes an ultimate science, and the man who dares to criticize it or to harbor even unspoken alternative ideas becomes not only immoral and irrelevant, but also unscientific. The assumption here is not so much that man can be God, but that man's idea can be God. At the level of the individual, the totalist sacred science can offer much comfort and security. It applies lies in it appeal lies in its seemingly unification of the mystical and the logical modes of existence. For within the framework of the sacred science, there is room for both careful, step-by-step syllogism, I hope I said that right, and seeping non-rational insight. So strong a whole can be sacred science achieve over his or her mental processes that if one begins to feel him or herself attracted to ideas which either contradicts or ignore it, he or she may become guilty and afraid. His or her quest for knowledge is consequently hampered. Okay, and it talks about handshaking. Now I talk about this all the time. How at times they'll target me and they'll have like a white dude and a black dude. You know, whenever they see me, they'll start shaking hands. All right. So okay, if you experience this as a TI, go read this. Read this. It explains a lot. Okay. So loading the language. The group developed. I said loading the language. You hear the police siren. Whoop. The group develops a jargon in many ways unique to itself, often not understandable to outsiders. This jargon consists of numerous words and phrases which the members understand or think they do, but which really act to dull one's ability to engage in critical thinking. The language of the tourist environment is characterized by the thought terminating cliche. The most far-reaching and complex of human problems are compressed into belief. Highly reductive, definitive sounding phrases, easily memorized and easily expressed. These becomes the start and finish of any ideological analysis. Totalist language then is repetitively centered on all-encompassing jargon, maturely abstract, highly categorical, relentlessly judging, and to anyone but its most devoted advocate, deadly dull. In Lionel's Trilling phrase, the language of non-thought. Okay, and all parasitic strategies lower self-esteem and therefore destroy values. Parasite producer 3 practice. All right. So again, I'm not reading all of this because but I will. Let me. Particularly in this part, loading the language, it talks about the motivational states, desire states, towards these patterns focus directly objects and goal. Away from these patterns focus directly on identifying circumstances to avoid. Trigger is a stimulus response mechanism that starts a behavioral pattern of a trigger. Right. So that's the reason why I want to read this, because I talk about triggers and anchors. So to fully understand this, it can be applied negatively or positively, right? So this, again, this article talks about how it's been done. Let me see, remember here. Scroll back up. Applied to the Executive Success Program. Okay. So they can also, again, use this to either be positive or to give the appearance of it being positive, but also negative. Right? So let's go to 7. Doctrine over person. Again, let's go back to the Coercive Mind Control program. Right? And what does it say? Establish control over the person's social time and source of resources, right? Is, again, doctrine over the person. Okay? The personal experience of the group member are subordinated to the truth held by the group. Apparently contrary experience must be denied or reinterpreted to fit the doctrine of the group. The doctrine is always more important than the individual. Lifton. The sterile language reflects another characteristic feature of ideological totalism, the subordination of human experience to the claims of doctrine. When the myth becomes fused with the totalist sacred science, the resultant logic can be so compelling and coercive that it simply replaces the reality of individual experience. Consequently, past historical events are retrospectively altered. Right? Listen to this. Consequently, past historical events are retrospectively altered, wholly rewritten or ignored to make them consistent with the doctrinal logic. The same doctrinal primacy prevails in a totalist approach to changing people. The demand that character and identity be reshaped, not in accordance with one's special nature of or potentialities. Yeah. So how did I know that? I was taking computer science, and they talk about what is called a potentiometer, right? So that's just how I'm able to pronounce that one with ease. Okay. But rather to fit the rigid contour of the doctrinal mold. The underlying assumption is that the doctrine includes its, as I said, the doctrine here, outside, again, under surveillance, so they'll do it. Like I said, I'm not at home, so I don't have my sound effects that I have programmed into my app, right? So including its mythological elements, it's ultimately more valid, true, and real than is provide. Rather than modify the myth in accordance with experience, the will to orthodoxy require instead that men be modified in order to affirm the myth. The totalist environment counters deviant tendencies with the accusation that they stem entirely from personal problems, derive derived from on towards earlier influences. All right, and there's no example here. Um, let's see. Let me see if I can give an example. Again, for example, would be, and how I would explain it, right? This whole when myth becomes fused with totalist sacred science, meaning that the creation of technology to manipulate our minds, to create a new personality within an individual or a group of people without them even realizing it, right? To changing their behavior to where there is no evidence of an external force as the cause. And I always say, anything that happens to black people in this country, it's never a coincidence, an act of nature, an act of God, but it is created, developed, created, implemented, right, by these races. Okay, at the highest level. So whether that be corporate America, whether that be in the science field, whether it be within the government, whether that be in sports, in every aspect of society, is geared toward the destruction of the black man and the black woman and the black child and the black family ultimately. All right. 8. Dispensing of existence. The group arrogates to itself the prerogative to decide who has the right to exist and who does not. Usually held non-literally, this means that those outside the group are unspiritual, worldly, satanic, unconscious, or whatever, and that they must be converted with the ideas of the group or they will be lost. If they refuse to join the group, then they must be rejected by the group members, even if they are family members. In rare cases, this concept gives the group the right to terminate an outsider's life. Imagine that. Okay? So, since I've been here also, they've been totally, send me subliminal message about being assassinated. And today, I was thinking, I said, maybe I should. There are times when I'm here, I'm just like, maybe I'll leave really, really late just to see if they're going to do it. And there are times I have, but I had to stop doing that, right? Because, again, they want to keep you into this game to keep you distracted, to keep me particularly from exposing and continue to expose the truth. Why? Because of my purpose, right? And they help put me on this purpose, So they are the cause. And as with any, within any society, when the people have been oppressed, it is the oppressor that give cause to the warriors, or to the Christ, or to the freedom fighters, to the opposition. But they never seem to understand that. Why? Because again, these are the dark personality types, right? And they cannot think or cannot fathom as to why you have people who are fighting for people's rights, their civil rights, their human rights. If you go and watch the video of The Minds of Men, you can't find the original video on YouTube anymore. They had it removed, but you can find it on the Internet Archive site, and where Dr. Peter Bragan talks about that, how you had these white neurologists, highly recognized, highly coveted, evil individuals that were committing some of the most heinous crimes on human beings, and particularly within black culture, black community, right? And so when he talks about these individuals, when he's talking, he was like they couldn't understand why black civil rights leaders were fighting for the rights of black people. They couldn't understand it. They couldn't fathom that. The idea of treating a group of people so badly it was so normalized that it was like nothing to them. They didn't feel bad about it. They were really trying to explain why is it that black people were protesting. Why were their black community leaders fighting for the civil rights of their people? Because I would say this, white people as a whole, and again, I'm not every white people, but the vast majority of them don't see black people as people, even though black people are the ones who birthed them, and every other group of people on this planet. Okay. So when you understand that, something happened along the way to our cousins who are, other groups of people, ethnic group of people. They're not different race, right? They're just different ethnicity, different. They have different features. But again, you can find people in Africa who are black who have those features also: blonde hair, blue eyes, whatever color eyes, straight nose, thin lips. Africans have the most variety and phenotypes of all groups of people on this planet. Okay, you have black people with straight hair. You go to India, the vast majority of people in India are black people with straight hair, but they've been so conditioned by the Germans, right, in the invasion of East Ethiopia, which they renamed it to India and created the caste system with the untouchables. And America has a caste system too, but again, it's covered up by this idea that it's a class system. But no, it's really is a class system where there are certain groups of people who are at the bottom. And in order for you to rise, you have to become a gatekeeper. They have to be able to use you or to get some benefit from you, right? Whether it be through your brilliance, in order to serve those that rule. Okay? And if you try and deviate and to do things, particularly for black people as an individual, they will target you and villainize you in ways you can't even imagine. I guess you can, as if you're a black person, right? So yeah. And as I said, I was saying that here, the police sirens. Yeah. The FBI said, any future black leaders, we will destroy them if we cannot use them for our will and for our doing, for our advancement. Okay? So, where was I? Okay, so in rare cases, this concept gives the group the right to terminate an unsatisfied life. Lipton, the totalist environment always draws a sharp line between those whose rights to existence can be recognized and those who possess no such right. One underlying assumption makes this arrogance mandatory: the conviction that there is just one path to true existence, just one valid mode of being, and that all others are perforce invalid and false. For the individual, the polar emotional conflict is the ultimate existential one of being versus nothingness. He or she is likely to be drawn into a conversion experience which he or she sees as the only means of attaining a path of existence for the future. The totalist environment thus simulates in everyone a fear of extinction or annihilation. A person can overcome this fear and find confirmation not in his or her individual relationships, but only from the fount, so hope I'm pronouncing that right, of all existence. The totalist organization. Existence comes to depend upon creed. I believe, therefore I am. Upon submission, I obey, therefore I am. And beyond these, upon a sense of total merger with the ideological movement, ultimately, of course, one compromises and combines the totalist confirmation with independent elements of personal identity, but one is ever made aware that should he or she stray too far along this erroneous path, his or her rights to existence may be withdrawn. Okay? All right, so that's the 8 criteria of thought reform by Robert J. Lipton. And let me see. This video, I know, there is a lot of information. It's a lot of stuff to talk about. We're almost going on 2 hours, but I let me just touch on this, and I'm going to my next video will be about these things exactly, right? So we talk about undue influence, right? So again, this is from the quotes that gov. Okay, this is undue influence definition and applications, a project supported by the Borchard Foundation Center on Law and Aging. This is a report from 2010, right? And so it says, in 2009, the Superior Court of California, County of San Francisco, undertook to study the phenomenon of undue influence, supported by a grant from Burchard Foundation Center on Law and Aging. The impetus for the project arose from the lack of a definition of undue influence in the California Probate Code. The term itself appears in the Probate Code where the execution of wills is concerned, which when a gift is in question, and in other sections concern that will contest and probate transfer. It is also specifically mentioned in the criteria for a probate conservator of estate. The conservator of the estate may be appointed for an individual who is substantially unable to manage his or her own financial resources or resist fraud or undue influence, and yet there is no statutory definition of undue influence in the California Penal Code. So why am I going to do this, right? Because again, it talks about how when you can be labeled, right, by the state to have your competency taken away from you and then put in the hands of either the state or a person who is your handler, right, in order to take whatever it is that they want from you. So in California, we know there's a lot of movie actors, a lot of people who are, above living the middle class lifestyle, right? And so particularly older men who may be widowed or older women who may be widowed, you may have individuals come into their lives to manipulate them, right? To create undue influence, right? But as with us as TIs, it applies to us, excuse me, in a sense that what they do is they do cause undue influence on us, right? By attacking us in the manner in which they attack us, whether it be through psychological programming, whether it be through these crimes against us, poisoning, drugging, again, the use of technology to manipulate our minds. That we can look at these cases and say, well, we're experiencing the same thing, and we need another definition or a better definition when it comes to undue influences by the state, by those who are in religious cults, by religious organization, by corporations that you work for, those sort of things, right? So I'm going to talk about this in the next video. And the other document that I want to read again is called The Ascription of Criminal State of Mind Towards a Defense Theory for the Coercively Persuaded, Brainwashed Defendant. Okay? And this is very, very important, right? Because again, this is why I continue to record and do these things, because we have to gather all the information that we need, okay, to say this is what's been done to us. All right, and this is why I've been studying what has been done to me as a target individual, and also to others, And one of the reasons why they use the technology to manipulate us so that we are not in contact with each other, that we don't communicate with each other, is because, when we are individuals, they can easily, and they've done many times when TIs target individuals go to court to bring charges against the state or to the U.S. government security agencies. They're being told that to go see a psychiatrist, and their cases are being dismissed. I think it's without prejudice, meaning that they can't bring the case back into court. Okay. So, coercive persuasion or thought reform has been extensively described by psychologists and psychiatrists in field studies of prisoners of war, victims of Chinese revolutionary universities, captives of outlaw or extremist group, and members of religious cult. In more controlled setting, behavioral scientists have explored the contribution that isolation, psychological depletion, assertions of authority, guilt manipulation, peer pressure, and as I say, assertion of authority. You hear the police siren. Whoop. So can have in bringing about behavioral compliance and attitudinal change. Despite some disagreement over the theoretical model that best explains such change, it is generally agreed that certain elements or themes are centrally involved in instance of coercive persuasion. These include 1. Isolation of the victim and total control over his or her environment. 2. Control of all channels of information and communication. So I talk about this like every time when I go home, right before I go to turn on my computer, they will always use the police sirens. And whenever I go to shut down my computer, like I'll take my mouse and move the cursor over the window, the window icon where it brings up the menu to shut down, there'll be police sirens, meaning that if they shut down this program, that we as TIs will be arrested or killed, right? Because again, we are the evidence. We have the microchip that they've been engaging in these non-consensual human experimentation programs with, right? So this is why they're careful in terms of where in terms of letting you go out of the country, right? So if you're going out of the country, I said let you go out of the country, you hear the police sirens in the background, whoop, and as I said, go out of the country again, you hear it again, whoop. Let me say it one more time. Go out of the country. Okay, well, they were silent there. But anyhow, right? And so, like whenever time you go on a trip, whether it be out of state, out of country, they will try to manipulate you into not going. When that doesn't work, then they will use silent sound I'll use some type of subliminal to say, well, you know what, your trip has been approved. Okay? Because they already know where you're going, so they already have people there, waiting for you to arrive, and they can surveil you and again engage in the coercive persuasion programming. Okay? So, 3. Physiological debilitation by means of inadequate diet, inefficient sleep, and poor sanitation. 4. Assignment of meaningless tasks such as repetitious copying of written material. Now, also, the word copy, they've been using that within the past year also. Copy. But whatever. 5. Manipulation of guilt and anxiety. 6. Threat of annihilation by seemingly all-powerful captors who insist that the victim's sole chance for survival lies in identifying with them. No, thank you. We'll never join your destructive cult. All right. 7. Degradation of and assaults on the pre-existing self. 8. Peer pressure often applied through ritual struggle sessions. 9. required performance of symbolic act of self-betrayal, betrayal of group norms, and confession. 10. Alternation of harshness and leniency. Okay? Acting alone, none of these forces are likely to prove irresistible to a person of ordinary resolve, particularly if he or she is aware that an attempt is underway to influence him. Rather, and this is, like I said, what I've noticed in my target, and particularly when how they use Pam to target me, is that, she's been given certain information. This is why before she walks in the house, if I'm here, there'll always be police sirens. And as soon as I said her name, you hear whoop, right? Given certain information. This is what how she targets me, and particularly also at night if I'm sleeping over, I'm laying in bed with the police sirens constant. Whenever I glance at her, I just say I'm just laying in bed and she's in my peripheral view. As soon as the police siren comes on, she'll stick her fingers in her head, in her ear, right? So yeah. Where was I? Rather, it is the concentration of multiple forces, both physical and psychological, intensively applied over a short period of time, that give coercive persuasion its peculiar power. Okay, and again, I wouldn't say, in such a short period of time in terms to break your psyche, but this continues on for a long period of time. Okay, why? Because to reinforce the belief system, or to try to stop you from ever becoming conscious enough to where you want to fight back. And the minute that they see you fighting back is when they start to remove your resources, particularly your financial resources. So, for example, they fire you from your job, where you deplete your savings or what have you, because then you can't fight back. Okay? So, where is that? All right. So, many authorities, including the drafters of a Department of Defense report, prepare in response to evidence of worldwide collaboration by American prisoners of war, POWs, during the Korean conflict, have concluded that a determined captor possessing total control over the life and environment of a captive can produce behavioral and attitudinal changes in even the most strongly resistant individual. All right, so I'm going to end it right here. And like I said, I will my next video will concentrate on these two documents and how it applies to us, and also how we can use it in terms of bringing court cases against those within the government and security agencies, including law enforcement, who have engaged in crimes against humanity, in non-consensual, illegal human experimentation, and illegal microchipping of human beings without our consent. All right. So, that being said, I will talk to you guys on the next Target Individual program, Target Individual Experience.